Have you ever had to run or moderate a meeting in English? If so, how did it make you feel? If not, how would you feel if you had to? Tell me in the comments. I want to know. Well, if you know the right English phrases, it's actually pretty easy. You may need to introduce topics. You may need to encourage people to speak. You may need to handle disagreements, and many other things. The English expressions that you need are pretty simple and pretty easy to use. But if you don't know them, it can be really tough. So you're going to learn them in this video. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. If you enjoy the video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe. And now let's get into it. If you sometimes need to handle meetings, to run meetings, to facilitate meetings, there are some really common and very useful phrases that you can simply learn and then use to better handle those meetings, to better facilitate those meetings in English. So let's learn them. We're going to look at them by, let's say, purpose, based on the thing that we need to do inside of the meeting, okay? And we're going to start with starting the discussion, how we can begin the conversation, right? Usually meetings, you're talking about something. So what are we going to talk about? How can I begin things in a way that sounds friendly, approachable, right? So I may just say, let's get started. Maybe people are having random conversations. Okay, let's get started. This brings everyone's attention to me, and now we can begin, right? Before we dive in, let's recap what we have decided so far. So to dive in, another very common expression, this is to begin, but it has a feeling of really getting into it, being immersed in it. To dive in like a swimming pool. We're really going to tackle this and have an interesting, challenging meeting. We may discuss things, we may disagree, right? So before we dive in, let's recap what we've decided. So this is kind of setting a foundation. Before we really get into it, before we get started, let's talk about what we have done so far. To recap often means to go over things that we have talked about before. Now, I may want to set the stage simply by stating why we're here. Just in case you didn't know, maybe you were out sick. Well, okay, why are we here? The main goal of today's meeting is to, and then state the main goal. What is the purpose of today's meeting, right? So those are very, very useful ways to begin the discussion. Now, how about sort of setting the tone at the beginning? We're still around the beginning. Maybe we have some rules. Maybe we want to let people know how to interact with each other, right? Maybe we want to just state that we know that guy over there talks too much. Nobody wants to say it, but I want to just say a few things at the beginning so that everyone has those things in their brains as we go into the meeting. So feel free to raise your hand if you have something to add. This is saying don't just shout out what you want to say. Right? I'm saying feel free to do this, but what I'm really saying is this is how you should interact. I don't want everyone just arguing and fighting in this meeting. Maybe that's good for some meetings. For this meeting, that's not what I want. If you have something to say, put your hand up and then you can say it. Okay? Let's make sure everybody has a chance to speak. Some people maybe are more likely to talk and talk and talk and not let others get a word in edgewise. Well, in that case, I can say this at the beginning just as a reminder to those people who may talk too much, maybe, to, hey, let's get everyone's opinion. Let's have a balanced conversation, right? Now, maybe I want to actually get more participation. I'm seeing that some people are sharing more than others, okay? Well, I may turn to the person who talks less and say, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, Dave. Maybe Dave is usually very quiet. So I want to specifically talk to Dave. I'd like to hear what you think about this. Dave, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Dave, because Dave hasn't shared enough. Or, okay, Carl, thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. Then I turn to Dave and say this. Okay? Does anyone else have any thoughts or input on this? You can say thoughts, input, suggestions, whatever. The interesting thing about this is, if nobody has spoken, I maybe say something for 5 minutes. I give my ideas, and then let me go back, and then I get people to share. And to do that, I say now is the time to share. And to do that, I say, does anyone have input? Now, does anyone else have input is a little different. If I say, does anyone else have input, these two are talking a lot. They have a lot of input, and I want to ask people besides them if they want to share something. Okay, you two have shared what you think a lot. Anyone else? Right? So this is a great way to invite participation, right? A great way to ask people directly if they have an opinion is to say, what's your take on this? Now, you might say, this is putting people a bit too much on the spot, right? What if I don't have an opinion? Sometimes you want to do that. Sometimes you want to focus on one person and say, what do you think about this? Right? And that can be a good thing. Again, it's just a tool that you can use in some situations. Now, how about guiding things along? Guiding the conversation. Well, that's a very important thing to know how to do, right? So maybe people are mentioning unrelated things that I don't really want to talk about right now, because if we talk about everything, we'll never get to the thing that we really need to talk about. So stay focused. Stay focused. This is a great way to get things back on track. And you can say that. We need to get back on track. Let's stay focused on the topic of our budget for next year, or whatever the topic is, right? We're getting off track. This is letting everybody know, hey, this is not good. We're talking about a bunch of random things. The purpose of this meeting is to talk about the budget or whatever. So I'm just letting everybody know that this is not good. Let's refocus. Let's refocus on the thing that we're trying to talk about, the budget, all right? Now, sometimes a thing that somebody says is off topic, but still important. And so you don't want to shut them down. You don't want to say, hey, shut up. Don't say that. What you want to say is, that's good, but this is not the right meeting. So maybe we could talk about that next week. Write that down. Somebody write that down. Somebody write that down and make sure we talk about it next week. Let's get back on track. So it's respecting that they have an idea that's good, while at the same time letting everyone know that that's not the right thing to talk about at this time, right? That's an interesting point. Can you explain that more? Somebody who maybe has an idea but doesn't give any support, or is shy, maybe needs to be drawn out a little bit. Hey, that's a really interesting idea. Can you explain that more? Can you tell me a little more? Why do you think so, right? You're giving someone a compliment, which may make them more likely to want to share something, right? So that can be a really great way to get someone to give a bit more. Now, what about clarification? This is very important, because often people say things and everyone hears it and understands it in a different way. Right. So I want to make sure that I understand so that everybody understands. Okay, so if I understand, what you're saying is that, or if I understand correctly, you're saying that, either way, right? If I understand correctly, you're saying that, or if I understand, what you're saying is, this is me stating out loud what you said in my words, and if I'm wrong, that's okay, because then you can clarify and everyone understands. But if two people say it, then we can make sure everyone is clear and isn't having their own understanding, right? Now, maybe we're all talking about something and we all kind of agree, but it's here and there. All right, someone's stated some fact or statistic, another person is giving another example. So we all agree, but to sum up, our main point is, right? That's what we're all saying, right? Then at the end, I'll say, right, everybody? Our main point is that we need to, and then everyone says, oh, yes, that's right. Or someone says, not quite. Actually, I think what we're saying is, right? So you can say our main point, your main point. It's just a way to restate things or give a basic summary. And as we talked about, recap is very useful too. Let's recap what we've discussed so far. Again, recap is to just go over everything that has been discussed, everything that has been covered. Okay. Sometimes people do not agree. They have arguments, and sometimes it can get emotional, it can get personal, there can be a conflict, right? So how can we handle this kind of situation? Maybe it's me and another person who disagree. Well, while we may not see eye to eye on this, I see where you're coming from. So this is to say, eye to eye means we have the same understanding or the same opinion, the same view on something. Well, we don't, me and you, right? I see where you're coming from as especially maybe important for the moderator or facilitator to know how to use, because if you're just fighting with everyone who has an opinion and you're the one trying to run a smooth meeting, that could be bad, right? So I have an opinion as the person running the meeting. You have an opinion. It's different. We disagree. If I just say, you're wrong, you're an idiot, I'm right. Then they're never going to share their opinion again. But I also can't say, oh, yes, I love that opinion, so good, if I don't actually agree. So how do we thread the needle? We say something like this. Wow, we may not see eye to eye. That is the we disagree part, right? And I could say, while I don't quite agree, while I don't exactly agree, I see where you're coming from. What is where you're coming from? Well, this may be, I understand why you have this opinion. I understand your motivation. It's respectful. It is. It's showing the other person that you're listening to them and you at least care about what they're saying, even if you don't agree. Now, maybe someone just makes a statement and you think they're not justifying it. Well, if you have this opinion and you don't know why, you should have some data. Do you have any data to back up what you're saying? You're making a pretty bold claim here. Do you have any data to back that up? And if they say, yes, here it is, then maybe we can have an interesting conversation, right? So I want to hear all sides of the argument before we move on, maybe. This is another way to kind of get everybody to share. If somebody says something and other people are saying, oh, yeah, okay, let's move on. Yeah, everyone agrees with what he or she said. Well, hey, hold on. I want to hear all sides. I know that Dan doesn't agree, and so I know, we haven't heard everybody's opinion, so let's hear the opposite view. I want to hear all sides before we decide, right? So that can be a really useful one when people are maybe a little too eager to move on to make a decision when not all opinions or views have been expressed, right? Before we wrap up means to finish something, right? This is toward the end of the meeting. We've had some great discussions. People have shared. We've kept things on track. All good. Before we wrap up, does anybody have any final comments? This is just to get any little pieces, things people want to say, right? Very, very useful. Let's go around the room for any last thoughts. Anyone? We'll go in order. You, and you. This is great. You can even use this online if you're using Zoom or Teams or whatever. Let's go around and see if anyone has any last thoughts. Let's go around. You don't have to say the room, but it's basically the same thing. If there's anything else, or if there's nothing else, anything else, nothing else? Yeah, either one, actually. If there's nothing else, if there's anything else, in this case, if there's nothing else, let's discuss CTAs. That means if nobody has other things to say, then we can finally talk about what everyone should do after the meeting, right? What you're supposed to do now that the meeting is done. What are you going to do? What are you going to do to carry out maybe what we agreed or what we decided? Now, if I say if there's anything else, then maybe I could say if there's anything else, send it to me after because we're short on time. I'm saying maybe there's more, but I don't have time for more right now. So it's a little different. If there's nothing else, let's do this. If there's anything else, and then maybe say that you don't have time to get any more opinions, but people can share them over email or talk about them in the next meeting. Finally, at the end, right? Thank you everyone for your contributions. Basically, everyone who said something, I appreciate that you said something, right? Let's call it a day. I'll send a summary of our discussion and the action items. Action items, again, are things that people are supposed to do, the actions that people have at the end of a meeting. I appreciate your time and input today. Again, it's just recognizing everyone who shared their ideas and thoughts and had a discussion for being there, for contributing, right? Okay, have a good one, everybody. Until tomorrow, until next week, until whenever. It's a great way to casually, it's not very formal, but it's still, I think, very professional and common to say until next week, until tomorrow. It's, I think, a great way to end a meeting with a sort of positive, upbeat sort of tone to let everyone know that, hey, we're going to keep talking about this, or I look forward to seeing everybody, or have a great day, that sort of positive feeling. So if you have any questions about any of these, I know we moved very fast. If you have any questions about any of the expressions we talked about to handle any aspects of a meeting in English, there's a lot to it. Of course, there are many other phrases that we could have talked about. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and also get a free course in the links in the description.